Hello everybody, welcome back. It's been a little bit and I've been thinking a lot about Destiny 2 and I've got some thoughts on the state of the game and its future that I'd like to share with you guys. One of the bigger things I want to focus on in this video is what I think is most important for a game like Destiny and stuff I'd like to see make its way to the game. And to close out, I'll speak briefly about Anthem. The video might sound very negative at times, but trust me, I still enjoy playing the game and I really want to see it continue to improve, so that's why it might be a little harsh. It's really just tough love. So let's get started. Destiny 2 is currently in the state again that happens after most of the content from a DLC or expansion has been out for a little bit. It's where the community quickly starts to transition from sharing secrets and enjoying all of the brand new stuff to filling up the forums and subreddits with endless suggestions and much needed quality of life changes for problems that have either been plaguing the game for weeks or even months. On top of all of this, the passionate players naturally end up forming wish lists of features and creating concepts that end up circulating throughout different platforms, all the while making a lot of the community both more agitated and bummed out at the pace of updates and meaningful communication. And also just the fact that it's a lot easier to come up with a cool concept than it is to actually implement it in a game. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't impacted by all of this, and it's that time of the year again when Destiny just can't hold my attention for more than a few hours. Unlike the past, we actually have some content releasing over the month with some new stuff to chase in just a few days. It's just unfortunate that the content released is not exactly groundbreaking. It's very grindy, and a lot of the loot is probably not better than the stuff you already have, assuming you've played Forsaken or even previous expansions. While there are highlights of the DLC, it definitely feels more like filler content, especially in the way it's spread out, because it's not humanly possible to produce quality expansions of the size of Forsaken every 3 months, every 6 months, or even every 9 months. It takes a very long time to make good content, but that's no excuse for the lack of updates, whether it be improvements to progression or just tuning the sandbox for PvP. Some of the things I want to cover in this video are some ways to provide longevity and depth to the game, my thoughts on the overall state of Destiny 2 as it is, and what I believe Bungie should be prioritizing right now. Keep in mind all the things I'm saying in this video are my opinions, and I'm just looking at the game through a lens that may be unique to me. Some players who may play more casually may still be overwhelmed with stuff to do and haven't even thought about changes or updates that they want, and is still just enjoying the content. That's awesome, but for me, there's many issues that seem to resurface every time we get back to waiting for new things to do, and eventually it starts to bug me. To me, there are 5 important categories that should be stressed when developing a game like Destiny. Number 1 is interesting loot and the power fantasy. Number 2 is RPG elements, including crafting, upgrading, transmog, modifications, etc. Number 3 is social systems like LFG and matchmaking. Number 4 is customization and personalization. And number 5 is meaningful progression and depth in progression systems. And as much as I love a good story, I don't think the story in a game like Destiny matters nearly as much as the aforementioned categories. The campaigns are not nearly as impactful as the gameplay loops and cooperative activities that keep people playing. Although having a great story alongside that would be perfect, and probably highly unlikely unless these studios have the same amount of time to make a story as Rockstar. So taking a look at the 5 points here, first is interesting loot. Destiny has gone back and forth from having some of the coolest loot in video games to having some of the most bland and forgettable loot. I think it's more important to make fewer unique and powerful items that are harder to obtain, or at least more uncommon, than a ton of loot where half of it isn't better than what you already have, or is a very obvious reskin with little to no modifications or special attributes. Quality over quantity for me. There's a lot of awesome guns in the Destiny series, but there's also a lot of filler. Not to mention half of the loot was made obsolete in a game which already struggles to provide a plethora of interesting and strong and fashionable rewards, which in my opinion was a terrible move by Bungie and would absolutely be in their best interest to come up with a fix for that. Like I mentioned in my fashion video, they could turn all year 1 armor into ornaments that could be applied to any current gear slot, give all year 1 armor and weapons random rolls, whatever. Secondly, RPG elements like crafting, upgrading, transmog, and modifications are very important for a game like Destiny. For Destiny 2 to reach its fullest potential, it needs to not just dip its toes into RPG elements, but it needs to dive headfirst into them. People love the crafting mechanics from the Dawning, and people are craving for more ways to upgrade their gear with perks and want more depth to masterworking, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen a post about transmog since Destiny 1. And a reminder I think Bungie could use is that you can make a game with depth but not make it absurdly grindy. It is possible to make an engaging game with deep RPG elements that doesn't require you to spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to feel accomplished. I'm sure there's tons of YouTube videos that have talked about why the game needs to embrace the RPG side, so that's all I'm going to say about that. Social systems such as in-game LFG and more ways to matchmake are virtually absent from Destiny and Destiny 2. There is no way to group up with people in the game to play the toughest endgame activities like Nightfalls, Raid, Blind Well, Escalation Protocol, and the fact that Bungie hasn't compensated for the lack of LFG systems with matchmaking has definitely been one of my biggest complaints over the past few years. If it weren't for LFG websites in Destiny 1 and Xbox One's LFG feature that was implemented in time for the sequel, things would be a lot more frustrating for me. It would be a huge win for the game if there was a proper way to group up and connect with people in the game itself to actually play the content. I think it's kind of absurd that heading into 2019, a game as cooperative and group friendly as Destiny 2 doesn't have any way to matchmake or LFG with anybody. If they're making Destiny 3, which I imagine they are, then this should be a huge priority for Bungie. Next is something Destiny has really struggled with: customization and personalization. This includes the personalization of armor and weapons, the customization of skill trees and comboing perks and abilities, and character creation. Destiny does all of these pretty poorly, to be honest. The character creation is the exact same as the first game, which was pretty much the bare minimum customization. Subclasses used to be more customizable, but were reduced to unconfigurable skill trees with preset perks that can't be upgraded or swapped out. And there's very little weapon or armor customization aside from shaders. They could add things like armor glows, chroma, armor auras, patterns, materials, weapon modifications, and attachments. These are all examples of things that I just threw out of the top of my head and that I'd love to see in the game that would allow so much more personalization for the individual. Destiny could really use an upgraded customization system to really make your Guardian stand out from everybody else's and give you more options to make your Guardian feel like it's yours. But one thing I fear is that Bungie is set too far in this format to change it. We got armor glows, which are basically chroma, back in Destiny 2 for about 2 months, and that was it. I'll say Bungie hasn't really pushed the boundaries of what you can do with customization and stuff, and in a game like Destiny that kind of blows my mind, seeing as how many possibilities there are for the fashion endgame. And lastly, a game like Destiny needs meaningful progression and a lot of depth to those progression systems. Masterworking was a step in the right direction, but at the current pace it hasn't evolved nearly enough since its implementation. There was a great post on the Destiny the Game subreddit by Calamity Cat the other day that suggested the idea that the masterwork level of a gun should increase from using the item. Similar to the way upgrading perks worked in Destiny 1, except upon getting a gun, initially you'd have all the perks unlocked, but the gun would receive additional bonuses from using it more. This way you could passively level up your weapons, which would unlock new perks, options, or visual enhancements without having to grind for resources to upgrade it. This idea is fantastic and mirrors an idea I had early on in 2018 that suggested exotic armor and weapon ornaments should be unlocked by using the armor piece or weapon. The objectives for upgrading weapon and armor pieces could be as simple as getting kills, or they could be secret objectives like the Worldline Zero Catalyst that you have to uncover as a community. Speaking of Catalyst, they were a great addition to the game, and I have to ask, why haven't we got any more? The only thing I dislike about Catalyst is that they are left up to RNG. There is a place and a time for RNG, but I feel like Catalyst should be earned through challenging triumphs, or at least have a solid path to get the Catalyst. Other things that could use some more depth or upgrades are perks, armor attributes, and abilities. Being able to enhance your perks through gameplay or upgrade your abilities would be a very nice feature. Credit where credit's due, there are some really great systems in the game like enhanced perks and rare curated roles, but I feel like Bungie can do better after 4 years. For example, there should be a much bigger incentive to hit max level cap. Currently, once you hit max, you get nothing. No upgrades, no unlocks, nothing. I think that's one of the biggest problems is that the leveling metagame is just so boring, especially with how harsh the RNG can be. And since we're on the topic, let's talk about a few big issues plaguing the game right now. One of the biggest for me personally is the RNG in seals especially. It seems like the community has come to a consensus since Forsaken's launch that RNG in seals is an awful decision. I very passionately spoke about this topic back in November, and the TLDR for that video is basically, if the difference between someone having a title and not having a title is luck, then the seal is poorly designed. RNG is fine, but you shouldn't have to sit there hoping and praying to get lucky for months. Still waiting on my Dreaming City Ghost Shell, by the way. There needs to be some sort of drop protection, or as I proposed, just tie those items to Triumph so if you complete the Triumph, you get the item. It gives the player a clear path for acquiring the item by either grinding for progress or completing a high skill activity. Other than titles, another big problem is getting 5 helmets in a row when all you need is a pair of boots. The problem has existed since day one of Destiny 1 and has always felt awful. I get that it's part of the grind, but at some point it would be nice to have a system that can prevent something like that. The state of the game has been much worse in the past, and the game is not terrible right now, as many players are still enjoying the meat of Forsaken and the new activities of Black Armory. But it's definitely starting to fall into that state again of players getting anxious and irritable thanks to the slow pace of updates and lack of development roadmaps. This is only compounded by Bungie's silence from their annual winter break, which is why the beginning of the year is typically super slow for news and big updates. But even during the other seasons, Bungie has seemingly struggled to update the game at a reasonable pace. One thing that is really hurting the game right now is the lack of impactful quality updates, crucible tuning that changes the meta, and updates to old content like old gear, old raids, and Xur. Telling players in December that they'll have to wait until March for updates to Xur is not setting a good bar. I would very much like to see Bungie make another State of the Game post that addresses the hot topics and big problems in the community, and promise to prioritize them now instead of timing big updates with the release of a new DLC. Though I don't run Bungie or Activision, so what do I know? As I've said before, content brings in players, but quality updates keep those players playing. The new content could be amazing, but if the game's health suffers, then so will the population, because the day-to-day play will be much less enjoyable. Now I know this video is longer than usual, and I don't want to lose myself rambling for too long, so I'll wrap it up with some closing thoughts on games like Anthem and The Division 2, and my hopes for those games in the future. Naturally, there's going to be people taking sides, and to be completely honest, I really hope Anthem and or The Division 2 kicks Destiny 2's ass. And I don't mean that in a toxic way. Competition is much needed. If a game like Anthem knocks it out of the park, it will hopefully motivate Bungie to try and make a better product. Not to mention, it's just awesome to have multiple options for players. I hope all the future games in the genre are successful. I can't complain about having more choices, you know? I think Anthem has a great opportunity to outdo Destiny on so many levels. While I don't think Anthem will be able to completely crush Destiny in every category like art direction, music, or Destiny's meritorious gameplay, I think it could really introduce some seriously good customization and personalization and progression systems, and potentially a more engaging story, although that one is more up in the air. I'm really looking forward to games taking the foundation of what things like Destiny have created and building upon it and improving it to making it something even better. The thing that makes me most excited for Anthem is honestly the lack of PvP. I think this opens up a really great opportunity for BioWare to go all out with the power fantasy and not have to worry about balancing abilities and weapons in a multiplayer scenario. If it has interesting loot and a fun gameplay loop, a progression and customization system with depth, RPG elements, and some kind of matchmaking system, and they're all done in a smart, fluid, user-friendly way, then I think I could see the game becoming a big hit. Hopefully both Anthem and Division 2 crush it and turn out awesome, and I'll absolutely cover them on the channel. Thank you everyone who made it to the end of this video. I know it was a very long one, but I had to get all these thoughts out there, and hopefully it sparks a good discussion. I always read the comments, so if you got something to say on this topic, please speak your mind and be kind to others who are sharing their thoughts as well. If you enjoyed the video, please share it around. That's really all I can ask. Since Destiny is slow around this time of the year, I'm making an effort to stream more, and I'm so close to finishing my PC build, so once that's done, expect to see a lot more streams over at twitch.tv/ninjapups. I don't have a schedule and probably won't anytime soon, but feel free to stop by if you catch me live. And that's going to do it for this one. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week.